Hello, lovies. It is Coach Ange, and we are here in season 3 with another episode of A Little Perspective. Hello, Samyukta. How are you doing today?
Hey, and I'm doing great. I'm just really happy to be doing another episode with you and another episode for season 3. I'm really excited to introduce our guest this afternoon. Her name is Samantha Evans. I met Sam earlier this year on a panel discussion regarding ethics of accessibility and inclusion. So, Sam is an association professional and a disability advocate, especially in the angle of accessibility. So, I'm really excited to have her share her experience and perspective on the accessibility side for people with disabilities. So, Sam, can you take it away? Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sam Evans. I am an older white woman, deaf of hard of hearing. I also have an auditory processing disorder and a disability called dyscalculia. It's very hard to say. And so I work as an association executive. I've been in the association space for about 25, coming up on 30 years. Along with that comes meeting planning. But for the last 7 years, I've been really lucky to find a marriage of accessibility association and event planning, working with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So the members in our organization are all accessibility professionals that work in built environment, digital space, policy, governance, et cetera. So I get to support really great work about disability inclusion with my day-to-day job. And I work as a certification manager. So I manage all of the certifications that are volunteer built about accessibility professionals and expertise. And so um, that's where I spend most of my time, but I do spend a good bit of my time as an advocate trying to reach out to do additional education and awareness raising. And so I do a lot of outside the job things outside of association and certification, particularly trying to get accessible events to find the sweet spot to where people understand how to bring both virtual and in-person events to be accessible.
That's really neat. So you are in the digital accessibility world, but then with the event side, that's in-person events, right?
It is, and we have a good portion of our membership. So I've learned a lot about built environment, physical accessibility along the way. Um, it- Way back when I first started learning about event planning and in-person meetings, my meeting planning mentor uses a wheelchair, and one of our event chair program committee is a little person. So when we would go to tour locations and facilities, and my roommate was blind, so I couldn't leave her at home for 2 weeks. So we were quite the troop to come and check out spaces, cities, locations, and so accessibility on the physical side has always been part of my event planning knowledge. And now that I work with digital accessibility, that kind of combines into where we live today.
That's really neat. So you said a phrase, built environment, physical accessibility. Is
So
that, go
that
ahead.
sounds kind of strange. It means like physical spaces, buildings, properties, like spaces, parks, and physical accessibility, meaning how it impacts people's bodies and their ability to use their bodies equitably in spaces and places. So under accessibility policy things, you'll find built environment, physical accessibility, digital accessibility, the digital world, and then accessible learning materials and information kind of as 3 big buckets. And that depends on how people choose what's available to them, how they can get it, that government information, policies, online, paper, books. So education has a lot more about learning materials and then work and other live, lurk, learn, play today in the digital space, along with the physical environment that we live in.
So you said something else. I'm sorry.
No,
Because
go ahead.
not a lot of our apologies. Not a lot of our viewers are going to really know the world that we all know pretty well. So I wanted to ask, you used the phrase use their body equitably. And I know what that means, but I don't know that everybody would. And I think it's a really huge part of the way that we can help people who don't have this lived experience understand what DEI and equality is. It's about evening things out so that I can use my body in an equitable way. Would you elaborate or kind of dig into that a little bit and explain it?
So I'll do my best to use what I've been taught by my colleagues who have physical disabilities. And what we want to make sure of, so I subscribe to a social model of disability where it's our responsibility as humans and agencies and companies to remove barriers that prevent people from being able to engage. So when we talk about people being able to use their bodies equitably, it's usually not a person's perspective. In social disability is it's not a person's body, mind, or other that's the barrier. It's the world that we live in that's the barrier. So everybody's body has capacities to engage in the way they live. They may use an assistive device. People who use wheelchairs, their wheelchair is an extension of their body. For people who use scooters or assistive arm crutches or other devices or braces, those are all extensions of their body. And so with what's available to them for their assistive technologies or their adaptive strategies, then if we make it the world so that they can use their bodies equitably, not preventing that person, that whole person and everything they use to live, if we can prevent a barrier, then we are allowing space to be equitable for their body and their use. And so if we remove thinking about what people consider typical or what people consider normative, that human body and the human experience is diverse. Everybody's body's different, but there are things that prevent some human bodies from being able to access, engage, participate, or make it harder. And so equitable use with the physical body means creating either accommodations or removing barriers completely. We're not to complete removal, but we are in a place in many countries in the world where we're able to recognize this is a barrier. Second, produce an accommodation or built access points that provide whomever might need it access, and that usually winds up benefiting non-disabled or not yet disabled people as well.
Yes, so true. And I think COVID has shown that in a lot of ways, right? Because COVID forced us to implement measures that are very disability friendly that obviously could have been implemented prior to now, but until the businesses had to figure out how to continue to make money, it wasn't a priority for them. And so now work from home and flexible work schedules and things like that, which allow people with disabilities who want to work to do so, also benefit those who aren't disabled. And there's a million scenarios like that. So I'm so glad you said that because when people see equity and equality, a lot of times it almost triggers them to think of the opposite, where they are then going to get less, but the literal definition is equal. So thank you for that. This is so
And so I
good.
think that's equal rights, human rights, civil rights. It's not like pie. Somebody doesn't get less because somebody gets what they need. So
Right, right. And you know the reason that we call this podcast and the company A Little Perspective is because we want to emphasize the value that everybody's perspective has. You know, it's not just because you don't fit XYZ doesn't mean that your input won't make a difference, not just for the person who gets to say so, but for the greater good as well. And we're seeing that luckily and the increase in diversity of boards across, you know, the big companies and things like that. Um, what do you think is one of the bigger barriers or barriers to those you know what? I want to get back into digital. I'm sorry. I'm taking us too far offline and I don't want to go there. I'm sorry. The ADHD rabbit hole is getting the best of me. So sorry.
I understand. I understand.
Samyukta, you had a question about the dyscalculia.
Actually, yeah.
Yes, for sure. So I was wondering if we could um talk talk to you on a more personal level, and would you be willing to share more about your disability and how it has impacted you, and especially dyscalculia? For our viewers, I don't think um, very many of us know what that disability is.
So when I was a child, it was hard to pick which ones were the parts apart because I didn't hear well. I had an auditory processing disorder, and dyscalculia, it presents as kind of spatial relationships and math. And so put all that together in a kid in a math class. And I used to joke when I was little that I was allergic to math. And my teacher said, "You just don't listen, you just don't pay attention, you're not studying hard enough." And I would literally be in tears trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, especially when I was younger, because when we're young, people are playing with blocks and spaces and kind of abstract concepts in space, and I just didn't understand it. My brain just didn't process the spatial relations for things. Um, so it was a real challenge. So I worked really hard in other places to try to get around that. Um, so dyscalculia, I didn't know what it was. I had never heard of it until I got into college and was taking a statistics class that I had to have to get my undergraduate degree. And I couldn't understand probability. I couldn't understand what that meant in relation to things. And professors would be like, "Well, it's this, and it's very clear." And I dropped stats 3 times until I got to my fourth professor. And she pulled me aside one night. She goes, "Can I talk to you about, you look really confused when we talk about spaces and probability and how these content pieces fill up the space that we're talking about as percentages." And I said, I understand what you're talking about. I don't understand. My brain can't process it." And so she asked if I would be interested to talking to an educational psychologist. And I said, "Anything. I have struggled with this all my life. I couldn't understand algebra. Geometry was great because I could draw things. So it means I couldn't do trig. So math always held me back because I couldn't get that process to happen without a calculator. Excel's my friend, but the educational psychologist, uh, we talked as an adult, not as a child, and she was like, "This is really simple. You have a processing disorder called dyscalculia, and it usually affects space, sometimes calculations, math, and how those pieces come together." And so it's a bit different if you've met one person with dyscalculia, like you've met one person. So it manifests differently. I think when I was learning to drive, the thing that would make most sense to everybody that has seen yellow, dashes on the road, long dashes. To me, it appeared that there was the same amount of space between a dash and the dash that was painted, and it's actually twice the distance. And so, just as an everyday thing that everybody's seen on the road, my brain doesn't process that distance as twice the length of the painted dash. And it really, so it's very, well, it's how my brain processes. So it's what I'm used to, but I have to teach myself what those spaces mean. So I have to learn a little bit about spatial relationships on things, which is weird because I can do Tetris like nobody's business and I can tell you if something's going to fit in its space. But when it comes to other things, but dyscalculia for me with math was the hardest thing. I failed math until somebody took the time to say, "You look really confused. You can talk about this." And so Excel has been my friend since for a couple of decades. And now I know I have the ability to ask for the ability to have a calculator. It's not because it makes it work for me. So it's not a common thing. But it really, when I look at things in spaces especially on digital screens too, I have to think about what my brain processes and how those spaces actually interact with one another. But add letters and numbers together in a math equation, algebra, when that first got presented to me, no sense. I couldn't logically do it until somebody said, "We're trying to find out what's missing." So when somebody could explain it to me in a word problem, which seems the inverse of what a lot of kids have, word problems were challenging, but it became a conversation versus symbols, numbers. So um, anyway, accounting would have been my nightmare profession to be forced into.
Oh, oh my gosh, I bet. I bet. Thank you. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing that. So knowing you, I know you've been a really a big advocate in pushing for digital accessibility. So even when it comes to accessibility realm, a lot of people still think that it's only the physical but digital accessibility is also a huge part of it. Can you tell us what is digital accessibility, and can you give examples of what accommodations can be provided from a digital angle?
Sure. So when we talk about digital accessibility, and Tim Berners-Lee is one of the founders of the internet many decades back, digital accessibility means providing disabled people equitable access to engage with, learn from, and work in the digital space without barriers using their assistive technologies or adaptive strategies of choice. So we have to go back a little bit. If we think about people with physical disabilities, they may use a chair, they may use a stand, they may use a cane, they may use things to help their bodies. In the digital space, people with disabilities may have their challenges. If we wanted to start with physical disabilities, thinking about motor skills and the ability to use your fingers to operate a mouse. If you couldn't operate a mouse, a lot of the digital world would not be accessible to you because the actual code underneath requires a click. So the alternate to a mouse is a keyboard or eye tracking software or something that is based in keyboard navigation. So if the code is not written that way, somebody who can't use a mouse can't, if you can't click to pay your bills, if you can't click to sign up for a webinar, if you can't, so there are things that are, it's technical underpinnings, but there are a lot of people with disabilities that use assistive technologies. And the things that usually come to mind first are people who are blind, low vision, or deafblind who use screen readers and or refreshable braille displays. Code and websites and things that are not written the right way can't be read by those technologies. Literally, there's no way to engage, or it's just junk, or it jumps over things, or you can't get to the interactive elements. And so that means we've eliminated everybody who can't use a mouse. We've eliminated anybody who uses a screen reader or text-to-speech tools, which are a little different. They are literally reading. They may not engage with the underset, or people who use a refreshable braille display. So, okay, so we've got a big group of people there already. Now, if we think about people who have color deficiencies or in other parts of the world, color blindness, when you use color alone or you don't have color contrast, we've also presented additional challenges to that whole group of people by design considerations. So now let's move into people who have vestibular disabilities, where that means you have some challenges with balance, and motion is a challenge. So much in the world has blinking lights that are people that are photosensitive, but motion can cause literally looking at a screen that has movement in it that you can't stop. Automatic video players, carousels, things that move can literally make people feel physically sick and off balance, and you can't stop it. So there's no way you just have to leave. So think about all the things that we present in that fashion. We've already gone through a lot. Now, if we talk about people who are deaf, hard of hearing, so much is presented audio only, without captions or without accurate captions. Then we're removing the ability, or the only way to reach your company is by telephone. So when we think about the digital world we live in and all the ways that things get presented, there's so much that if we don't consider how to create it or remediate it, because a lot of our vendor partners don't know what it is. So, so that the big power ask in the disability world is when people put that into their business decisions to only purchase products that are digitally accessible, because then they're going to drive people, hopefully the vendors, to do better, but it makes their products and services usable. So accessibility in the digital space doesn't mean I can get to it on the web. It means I can use it without a barrier. And so if you've never used it, so if you've ever, temporary and episodic disabilities are a good example. Somebody breaks their hand, their wrist, their arm, they have to learn how to use voice commands for their, for their office suite kinds of things. Learn really fast what you can't do. But there's some really interesting ways that people can test that stuff out without trying to simulate somebody's disability as well. Does that help a little bit about digital accessibility?
Yeah, no, that was wonderful.
That was really good.
The colorblind, I didn't even, think about that. That made me think, as someone who's a presenter, like, oof, I need to make sure that I'm careful in that area too. So wow, it's good stuff.
So not
Thank you.
using color alone, making sure your buttons have letters and words in them, or your graphs have a pattern or gradient to differentiate a little bit. I think 8 in 10 men have a color blindness, red green color blindness. There's some other types of color deficiencies, but
Yeah.
it's really common. Most people who know, they'll just say they aren't going to come up to you and say, "Hey, I'm color deficient." They're going to sit next to their buddy next to them and say, "Hey, which one of these is my number I need to worry about on this graph?" When we think about cultural too, we can't always presume everybody knows that red is the top on the stoplight, yellow is in the middle, and green is at the bottom. We need to make sure that we put stop, start, use words to not just color alone for buttons. That's a lot of
Yeah.
common things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's great stuff. What would you like to see happen in the next 5 years in the digital accessibility world? What do you feel is the next priority that we really need to focus on and improve?
I think the first ask is for people to understand how disabled people use digital technology with assistive technology, what that means. Because there's an assumption that because something's digital, it means everybody can get to it. While that does mean somebody who has physical disabilities or transportation, deficiencies, or they're in a transportation desert, which means they don't have to get out of their home with a vehicle and travel somewhere. That's super. Yay. But digital content doesn't mean everything's available for everyone to use. And so I think we're starting to understand just little bits about different types of disabilities and how that impacts digital access. That's the start. First start by raising awareness of accessibility and what that means for disabled people. First, that's where, if we can start there, we can make those steps towards the next pieces, which are my products, vendors, and services actually accessible? So I'm going to make a leap here on the biggest challenge we have in digital accessibility right now are products and services that are called overlays. And they are little widgets. Sometimes they look like a little circle with a Vesuvio man, like a human figure in a circle. And if you select that, then it pops these personalization menus, and they're all artificial intelligence that claim to make a website usable and accessible. They can't. They're actually putting an additional layer between you and the product. And about 95% of what they claim to offer is built into every operating system and browser for free. And any adult that has been using assistive technologies is already going to have their system set up to function the way they want it to work. So there's a good bit of false advertising. And unfortunately, it sounds really appealing because then you don't have to learn anything about accessibility because there's a magic bullet. And I think everybody would know if it sounds too good to be true, it often is. So if you wouldn't rely on ChatGPT to find a legal solution for you, why would we want to use something like that to solve digital accessibility? So not there yet. So AI tools can find about 30 to 40% of the issues, but that other 60 to 70% is huge. And it's not there yet. It may be in the future, but my big concern is that they're very deceptive and they take advantage of good people meaning to do good things. And none of the overlays, none of them have ever come to any of the leading assistive technology companies to make their products usable with the leading assistive technologies in the world. None of them. So
Wow.
then you have to wonder what's their basis in, do they have any basis in disability in their origin story, or was accessibility a big money topic in the market and they decided to develop a technology around it?
Exactly. Exploitation.
And so in disability advocacy and justice, we know that's not a positive. And not to say some of those companies don't also employ teams that can do real accessibility work, but false advertising is really a challenge. The biggest thing they do is one of the big things is they say, we have a font that solves for dyslexia, which for anybody who understands dyslexia is not a visual tracking thing, it's a processing disorder. You know that they've already set forth the premise of false advertising by saying there's a font solves for dyslexia. So, but it sounds like a great solution set. Wow, I want to make sure that people who are dyslexic can read and stuff. But if you just peel back one layer, you can start to see where there's some challenges in the marketing practices.
Not only is that exploitation, that's also dangerous because like if I can't imagine. I'm just like it sounds like from the surface level, like it's like, oh, that's just like an honest mistake, or they're trying like to accommodate and do better. But no, that's just, oh gosh, you can't do that.
And that's what that marketing technique relies on, is that thought. But it's not
Mm,
understanding the implications underneath. And so the European Commission has put out an official statement about the dangers of overlays, because in Europe, you have to prove you are digitally accessible to do business in the EU. And so, and in our association, we have an ethics statement that says you have to be able to be honest about how you advertise what you claim you can do as an organization, member of our organization. And if someone doesn't, then members can challenge that, and they will have X number of months to change their marketing language and processes, or be able to remain a member. So
that's
ethics and
good.
accessibility is a big
Oh,
topic. So
I know. Yeah, ASAE, we have that as the couple of topics as part of those programming for that conscious inclusion. So yeah, there is ethics. It ties into accessibility for sure. Um, I wanted to ask, so if someone has digital access needs, it's
mhm.
already just being disabled. It's hard asking for accommodations, like because of just like the pushback, or just we don't know who to ask, or just like the lines of communication are not clear. There's not a pathway for a lot of us. And but when it comes to digital access needs, could you provide any advice or tips on where should we begin, like for when asking for these types of accommodations?
Is it okay for me to present a book that's a really good reference for people?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
Yeah.
and we'll put it in the we'll put it as our resources when we post.
Okay, so I don't know if you know Emily Ladau,
Yes, we have
but
it. That's a good book. You know that one too,
so
Ange.
this book is called Demystifying Disability, and it's what to know, what to say, and how to be an ally. And Emily is a disabled person that uses a wheelchair, and she's a brilliant advocate. But this is a really soft landing for people to start to learn about disabilities. And so that, and it's, look, it's 120 pages maybe, and there's an audio version of it, and there's a plain language for children version of it too. So anyway, what I would like for people to do, if they have the capacity, this is where we have to start thinking about accessibility from a strategy point. First, understand disabilities so that you understand what the needs are, so that you know what an ask is. But I really encourage people to get rid of what I call the polite ask, which results in the disability tax being placed on the person with a disability. If you have access needs, tell us what they are. That's the polite ask, which then means the disabled person has to put forth the effort, explain, disclose, and make a plea that they will be considered disabled enough to qualify for somebody to consider their needs and decide whether or not that need is valid enough to make a decision to deliver.
Mm,
That's very, I know the polite ask has been acceptable for a very long time, but it puts a lot of weight on the part of the disabled
it
person.
does. Like it's like our responsibility.
It does. And so what my ask is, and I think this counts for everywhere, is be very clear about what accessibility you've already built into your product services program. Put it up front so that disabled people will see it and be like, I'm already welcome here. Wow, they've already included this. Or say what you're able to provide. We can provide, and by what date. So sometimes that means there's a vendor and a contract that has to be signed. Um, but that means understanding first, it means if somebody is blind or low vision, they may ask for electronic text. That means I'm going to have the document. Either somebody on my team is going to make it accessible, or I'm going to send it out to somebody for accessibility checking and remediation. Or if they ask for large print, which means you're going to need to have a vendor that can produce large print, or Braille ready. Be ready. That is not going to come from your average copy house. So deaf and hard of hearing, can you provide captions? Do you understand the difference between AI captions And the joke in the DHH world is craptions, because it's kind of a crapshoot about whether what you're going to get is readable and whether or not it's just crap content. So people don't understand what error rates are in captions, and they don't know what accurate and usable means. And so if what you can provide is AI captions, say I can provide AI captions, at least then the person coming in will know what to anticipate and how much cognitive load is going to be added to their experience. Ultimately, we know what food and beverage is expected. We expect people to provide variety of food and beverage, but we also want to understand for neurodiversity, plain language, not moving too fast, provide the content in advance. This is going to help anybody who's neurodivergent, who's blind, or have any kind of cognitive reading, learning, processing disorders. Provide the information in advance to be able to let them process in advance. ASL sign language interpreters are a big consideration, but I think people need to understand that if sign language is someone's primary language, sign language is not a direct translation of written language. It is not the same thing. So if somebody's primary language is sign language and you say, I'm going to give you captions, it's not equitable. It doesn't provide them access to the way their body, which means their eyes and their brain, processes language. So understanding disability first, and then as you have time to grow, progress. Don't say, I'm not going to do it because it's not perfect. Progress over perfection. My friend Meryl Evans, not relation, it's her big thing, and I totally agree. Progress is progress, and that's how we grow. But there has to be a commitment to changing process and to budgeting, because all of our business operations have a digital accessibility consideration, and our in-person events have a accessibility consideration. So does that help a little bit if we think about major components of disability accommodations? I would encourage people to get rid of that polite ask, because that puts all the work on the part of the disabled person. It's nice to ask, but if you don't have any background in disability, what they ask for, they're gonna have to make a business case that I'm eligible to be able to participate with you. And that doesn't really feel welcoming. It's not. So just
Yeah. No, that was incredible. And so of course I have some notes. So, Samyukta and I are both in the DEI arena, and a lot of people though don't know what that is. So it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. But now, even though people don't even know what DEI is, now there's a B, which means belonging, which I love. I love that it's DEIB now. But earlier I asked you about having body equity, to be able to use my body the way others do. And so then you talked about the polite ask, and then went into details about how that puts the onus, the burden, the labor on the person with a disability. And I feel that that kind of goes back to the body equity thing. And it's almost as if they treat it, or it is sometimes treated as our fault. So Samyukta said, like, it's our responsibility to find a solution because it's our fault that we need it. And if we don't find it, then we just should be grateful that we're a part of whatever company or organization or whatever it is. And I hadn't really thought of like that full picture until this conversation. I mean, I knew that's how it was, but I also kind of had some internalized ableism where I accepted it. And now I'm reflecting back and I'm like, wait a minute. You're right. And so I think I love that polite ask. Man, I think that's empowering. You don't owe anybody a polite ask. You have every right to get those accommodations digitally or in person. And then of course the list of things that you gave us about digital, I hadn't considered a fraction of those. So I know our viewers haven't. So thank you. This was great. This was super great. Thank you so much.
I
Samantha, do you have
totally
other
agree.
questions?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Run it.
I'm already like putting notes for myself, just like for like me to learn and like me to think about, especially like, the polite ask, the body equity, and now like, and could we say that step stools are an extension of our bodies? Because
Oh, absolutely.
oh my
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
God. Because like we always say like we can't function without them. They are a tool for our independence. No,
In order
they
for
are an
us to have
extension.
body equity, they are an extension of our
You're
body.
they are. And so it's not any different. It's not any different. I have my meeting planning my, many decades ago, was a little person, our program lead, and he was like, this is very clear. I cannot engage in this world without the following things. I travel with these things. And it wasn't any different than my meeting planner who uses a wheelchair. And I was like, okay, to me, I was like, information in, and it has always been there for me since then. So as not a person with a physical disability, that was very clear. And that was all the information I needed to understand.
Yeah, so because you said that, no, like I because I'm a a traveler, I have a travel blog, and like just like the discrimination that we face, like being little people, and whenever I travel, I always request like the step stool for um reaching the sink, reaching the bed because the beds can be so high. And oh my God, like it's better now, but just like the pushback I receive for getting a step stool because they claim it's a liability, and or they would just like outright refuse to like provide me one. But oh man, like it's already wrong, it's already against the law, but now that like I'm really thinking about how I like we can't survive, we can't, these are basic needs we need met, and like
Basic rights.
basic rights, like to
Mhm.
use
They're
the
not special.
disability.
This is a human and civil right. And so this is
Mhm.
Yes.
DEI. It's not just practice. We're actually talking about the safety, security, and success of people's lives.
Yes.
And that's a
Yes.
very different perspective than a workshop or a checklist kind of a thing. And
Hmm.
so that sometimes can help people shift their perspective of how they come into things.
Totally. It's like just listen, right? Like just like take yourself out of the equation, like for once, and just
Yeah,
like
because it
listen.
doesn't have anything to do with you, sir or ma'am, or other. Like it doesn't have anything to do with you at all, person who's not disabled that I'm asking for my accommodations. Like it's not about you. But they act like, and especially in businesses, sometimes they'll act like it's coming out of their paycheck, and it's like, come on.
Yeah. And like we're learning that accommodations, like whether in workplaces or meetings, they're not expensive. They're not really expensive. It's like if you just see it as an investment, if you just like really reframe your thinking, like reframe your mindset and just see it as an opportunity, see it as an investment. And like when they're really not expensive in the first place, it's like, come on.
I really think that it's often seen as like favoritism, when and obviously that's clearly not the case because we're favoritism means more than, and we don't even have equal, so we certainly aren't getting more than.
Like we're just trying to get in. Like,
Yeah, we're trying to get, okay, now I can get to the door. Now can I open the door? Now can I come through the door? Oh, there's only 3 steps to get there. So, if we look at the customer journey, people always look at customer journeys. If we think about that from the perspective of the customer journey, from a disabled person's perspective, there are barriers that we have the opportunity to remove.
Mhm.
If we make that our intention, progress little bits at a time, we can make the world a more barrier-free place. And the curb cut effect, which is when people, if you see sidewalks where there's a slight angle to the sidewalk instead of a step up, the curb cut effect benefits people who have strollers or rolling suitcases or bad knee from the ski trip, or, but keeping the focus on disability equity first. And those benefits roll into others as well.
I know Samyukta has a question, but that made me think of something. Your example of the sidewalk made me think of a phrase that I have I'm trying to use more, and that's not yet disabled.
Mhm.
Because and that phrase would address someone who considers himself not disabled.
Not yet.
Because A, you never know. And B, if you have the benefit of growing old, you will not, something is going to fall apart eventually.
Everyone will
If
age
you're
into
lucky.
disability. Every
Yeah.
human, if they live
For
long
sure.
enough,
Yeah.
will age into
Yeah.
disability and acquire a temporary or episodic disability at some point in time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and if not even the temporary ones, like a ski accident or whatever,
Mhm.
sometimes those moments of having to use crutches or any kind of assistive equipment can really hopefully give people a moment to see, like, oh, this is what it's like, and I understand the value of a ramp now. And so yeah, that just made me think of that as well. So not yet disabled, so
Not yet
just
disabled.
wait.
It's
That sounds so
inevitable.
menacing.
Oh my God. It's
But it's a
inevitable.
reality. But it's a reality.
It's
It is.
reality. Yeah.
It is.
Well, thank you so much for this, Sam. I have one question before we wrap up. Just like hearing your story, hearing your experiences and everything. But can you comment on like progress made like for people with disabilities since you first started your career, and like the before and then the after, and how people with disabilities were treated and how they're treated now, and like what work still thinks needs to be done?
So I'm 53. So when I started work, we're going back 30 years. And so the ADA is 33 years old. So my professional career and my first starts and things were just after the ADA started. And ADA was mostly considered about physical environment, buildings, and physical access. And so I've seen good progress in that. I still see a lot of misunderstanding of being grandfathered in, which also is a colonial term that really needs to go away, away, away. But being, no, not under the ADA because my building is so old, but it's getting better. Um, and I think that's a lot of that is part of advocacy movements and pride in ownership of disability not being a bad word, and disabled people stepping up for themselves and rolling forward through the barriers. And um, so that's getting better. I won't say it's not. I think the biggest challenge we have is still a good bit of I'm neurotypical, so I don't understand what that means when somebody is neurodivergent. I think there's still, and it's probably part of the human condition to internalized uh, me and mine, them and theirs. And I hope that as people meet people that are disabled and neurodivergent and with mental illness and mental health considerations, with different languages, that people start to understand differences and diversity as part of the beauty of the human experience. I think younger generations demand that. That's my hope. That's the younger generations have this as an expectation of how the world engages with one another. I think that's I'm my perspective. I grew up in the 80s and we did a lot of fighting for equity and social rights and justice. But we're just starting to see younger people now like, what do you mean? It's not okay to be. And so I see lots of progress in that from younger generations. Digital accessibility is going to it's going to just be a pickle for a lot of years because our vendor partners are not willing to do the work and they monopolize markets. And they then put a barrier on their customers to not be able to deliver digital accessibility. And then that puts for the customer, how can I do this if everyone in my market doesn't provide this? Power of the purse comes in when that's where associations and societies and advocacy groups have the real power of the purse to say, we will not use, we will not promote, we will not engage with your products until you're accessible. That power of the purse is going to be, that's where associations and professional societies and trade groups and advocacy groups can really make the biggest difference with a touch to many, just one by one, because it's one-on-one, it's almost impossible.
I was Samantha and I were talking before this call,
Literally.
like about this exact thing, and said the exact thing that you did. And I told her, I said, I don't know if my hope in the next generation is delusional because things have been so hard these last few years. Like, I don't know if I'm just putting all my eggs in that basket, but I do think that there will be a good change because they are social media. They grew up on social media, and so they've seen and understood different perspectives quicker than any other, human. Because when we grew up in our neighborhood, and that's all we knew. These kids are growing up with the entire world in front of them. So they have so much more experience. And then George Floyd, of course, I think made that big that'll be a big
Racial,
turning point.
we are perfectly behind anything we claim to have accomplished in civil rights. In that, it's a whole different topic, but it's related.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I really like the fact that younger generations don't demand captions. They expect equity, and they don't have a place for inspiration porn because they understand that is but they understand that that is mocking somebody, and they have no place for it. And I think that's brilliant because there's a whole market of inspiration porn out
Yep.
that is related to disability, it doesn't advance disability rights.
Sets us back. And they're not doing the polite ask, and they don't have corporate loyalty because they don't think the corporation is going to be loyal to them, and it's not. And so they're speaking up and speaking out, and I think it's going to be really incredible. COVID was a big affect for change for different kinds of accessibility options.
I hope we don't lose that. There are so many people that think it's over and now we don't have to do that anymore. My biggest hope is that we retain what we
You
learned,
have to.
apply that for equity, and reach far more people. You can reach far more people who can't travel to you in person. There's still great benefit in what we learned during
Huge,
COVID,
huge,
along
huge.
with the health and safety of people with compromised systems, families, and considerations too. So
I mean, just being a single mom, like, and that is not even close to having a disability, but just that alone, and that's such a large population, it's like, yeah, I really, I'm being willfully, blissfully, ignorantly hopeful that we will continue. Um, but thank you so much. I think we all know we could probably continue for another 2 hours. This was such a great conversation. We really, really appreciate it. Sam, did you have anything else that you wanted to share? And we would love for you to let our audience know, anything that if any pages you'd like for them to follow to keep up with you or anything like that as well.
sure, people are welcome to, and I'm happy to. We have a really great network of people around the world that do different things. And if I can help connect you with somebody else that's a specialist in something or a resource, I mean, if we could dump our brains out, we could probably have the amazing resource library. But I'm happy to share what I know or what I use. And if somebody wants to contact me on LinkedIn, they're more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's probably the most public space to find me. And I'll have to look that up because I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. My apologies. I don't look at my own link there that often. So bear with me just a moment, and I'll put it into chat here so that we have it. It's Samantha.
Yeah, we'll put it in the comments. Yep.
Yeah. So but I'm always happy to chat with people and help you find access, resources, information, education. So Right, thank you so much. I hope that I did a good job of representing what I've learned about little people and barriers on engagement. I think a lot about that in physical space for travel for me with my colleagues and things. And I always ask, yay, I'm so glad you have ADA rooms. How many and what kind?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hoteliers' faces kind of drop. They're like, I was like, it's okay if you don't know what it is, come back to me and let me know. And so there's always a learning experience for hoteliers there because they probably don't know. And if they're willing to go and find out, hopefully there's some discovery there. So
Yeah. I'm sure they're like real proud of themselves to say yes. And then you're like, what kind? And they're like, what?
I just know that much. I just know that much. Like
I thought I was
Oh,
going to get a gold
wow.
star for that.
Yeah, right, right. Oh my
Hooray,
gosh. Like
yay.
the standards people set for
It
themselves.
is, but that's where
Yeah.
compliance is the floor, and that's the starting point. Compliance is the starting point.
Mhm.
When we actually talk
Mhm.
about human equity, it's a progress and it's not a destination, it's a journey. So if
Yeah.
we start at compliance, we'll already be ahead of the very low bar, and we can move forward from there.
Well, if any of you who are watching / listening did not know some of the phrases or words that Samantha was using, and you are in the event space, whether it's virtual or in person, then I would highly recommend you reach out to her on her LinkedIn. It is Samantha Spears Events, and we will have the link in the comments as well, because you want to do the right thing because it's the right thing, and she is going to guide you, because you don't know what you don't know. And if I didn't know it, then no offense, but I know most of y'all don't know it either. So I love
Yeah.
all of you, and I hope that y'all have the best day. Thank you again, Sam. We really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, y'all.